Up to this point, we've been thinking primarily about consumer choice, where demand comes from. It's time to start thinking about trade. But before we introduce production to our model, we want to start with a simple model of trade with just two consumers and two goods, where we don't have any production, but we're simply concerned about allocation. Who gets to consume our consumption goods, and how much do they get? So we're going to build a model in an Edgeworth Box framework to describe trade between two consumers with two goods. Now, in our previous lectures, we've had these indifference curves to describe how consumers' preferences look over consumption of two goods. So we have good X and good Y. Consumer 1 likes both, and the more that consumer 1 consumes, the happier that person is. The same is true for our second consumer. Happiness is increasing in consumption of both X and Y. Now we'll assume that we have some endowment of X and some endowment of Y, some of which is consumed by consumer 1 and some by consumer 2. So that's our resource constraint. Our total amount of X will be equal to the amount of X consumed by consumer 1 plus the amount of X consumed by consumer 2. And likewise, we have some total amount of Y, which is equal to the sum of consumption across both consumers. This allows us to combine our two sets of indifference curves into one graph. You can see that we take consumer 1's axis for X and Y and place it here, while at the same time representing consumer 2's consumption of these goods on this axis, which is upside down here, ranging from 0 to X total along this axis and 0 to Y total along this axis. This takes a little bit of practice to get used to looking at, but it actually makes our graph much simpler in that every point within the box represents some allocation of X and Y across consumer 1 and consumer 2. For example, take point A. At point A, consumer 1 will consume this quantity of X, leaving the remainder of X to be consumed by person 2. Same is true for Y. Person 1 consumes this quantity of Y, while person 2 is left with the remainder. And you can see that at point A, person 1 has a little X and a lot of Y, whereas person 2 has a lot of X and a little Y. Each point within the box represents a different point of consumption for our consumers.